Hello, I'm Roly. I'm one of the custodians of a woodland in the heart of Derbyshire. Have you ever visited a woodland or a forest and noticed twisted trees and trees which surround it, which gravitate towards it? I know just a man who can answer this question, Tony Waldron, another custodian of a woodland.
The world is covered in energy points, but not only energy points, but energy lines, which encircle the whole Earth, in fact. And dowsing is one way that you can actually discover where these lines run and where they cross over to form particular energy points, which can either be negative or positive. And some of those you can actually see visually, but dowsing is a more reliable way to do it. So within probably yards of where we're sitting, we probably find 2 or 3 crossover energy points that can be easily picked up by dowsing. The equipment actually is only like the petrol gauge in a car. So a set of dowsing rods or an hazel twig, which was the most common form of a dowsing implement in the early days, is just an indicator, because it's not actually the rods or the twigs that is picking up the actual energy that's flowing beneath your feet effectively. It is you that's picking it up, and it's you are making the dowsing rods move. It's the micro twitches in your muscles in your hand changed because of the electrical field that is actually making them move. You can do it with one stick. Not that I want to cut sticks off trees, but if I was to cut a stick off a tree, you can douse with that stick. I think from prehistoric times, our ancestors have known about these energy lines, and probably, we see that from some of the ancient sites that you see. But there's records going back quite a way in terms of the use of a dowsing rod. Matter of fact, in the Bible, I think in the Old Testament, Moses smote the ground and water appeared. And quite often using a staff, just a single staff, right, would sort of indicate where these changes in energy fields are and where water is. And of course, water is the most common reason that people do actually douse, to find a water supply. But then as you go through its history, there's a really good woodcut picture in a book called Metallica in the 16th century by Agricola. It's not about dowsing, it's about mining. In this woodcut picture, there is dowsers with the dowsing rods walking across the ground to actually help the miners find minerals. In fact, Queen Elizabeth asked dowsers to come from Germany. Germany is quite big in terms of dowsing, to actually find gold and minerals within Britain. And the guy that taught me actually had done work for BP and for Shell to find oil. It's a natural ability that we all have. It is. It's whether we choose to use it or whether we remember that we used to use it. Dowsing rods are only as accurate as the person doing the dowsing. The actual rods themselves are just an indicator, very much like the petrol gauge on your car. It is your body that's picking up the minute electrical fields that energy lines, water lines are actually giving off. These are very difficult to measure with electronic equipment, but your body is so sensitive you can actually pick it up. The art of dowsing is being able to tune in to the particular item that you're looking for and that energy frequency that it is giving off. So it can only be as accurate as the person who is looking for a particular thing, whether it be water, energy lines, minerals, and it's their ability to tune in that makes an accurate dowser. It's a bit like with healing. If you're working with someone else, a good healer will tune into the frequency that someone's body is, or person is emitting, and then that means that they can work together. A really good dowser can be 97% plus accurate. My first experience of dowsing was when a friend of mine needed a new borehole drilling, and he rang up the drilling company. This is the late 70s, early 80s. He rang up the drilling company and then sent this old guy in a battered Land Rover down to mark where they were going to drill. And my friend, when the drilling company came, right, said to them, "I'm paying a lot of money for this, and you've sent a guy with a hazel twig to tell you where you're going to drill. And the company said, effectively, we're not going to charge you if we're wrong, but he's more accurate than any current technology they had at that particular time. Geophys was still in its embryonic state, really. So it can be extremely accurate if the dowser is well tuned in. Now, for me, a positive reaction is literally the dowsing rods crossing. That is a sort of a yes to me. There's odd days it might change where they go apart, but in majority of the time, that's why you always have to tune yourself in to douse any project effectively. I can't stress this enough. The dowsing rods are inert. It's not the dowsing rods that are actually giving the indication. It's yourself that's giving the indication, and it's your hands that are making the rods twist. You can also find direction, because if I want to know if an energy stream is running left to right or right to left, I can ask the dowsing rods and they both tend to point the same way. Or you can use a pendulum. It doesn't have to be a rod or dowsing rods. You could actually use a pendulum, but that's more or less for a yes-no answer. And it's more of a sedentary work. So if I use a pendulum, I use it for map dowsing, which is something completely different, where you can be totally remote from the area that you're working in. So if you give me a project to look at what energy is flowing through your house, for instance, I will get a plan of your house beforehand and actually map it by map dowsing. And you might be 2,000 miles away, that's fine, you know. It still works because you tune in to that particular location and the frequency that location is working. Then I will physically go out and correlate the things that I've actually found. Dowsing is something totally different to what established science is. There's also a lot of issues because it's sort of more of a parascience subject, and a lot of what you do cannot be repeated over and over again, which is really what science is looking for. In Germany in 1924, Baron von Pohl decided that he would douse a whole village and got permission from the mayor to actually douse this village because there'd been a high incidence of cancer in that village. He didn't know when he doused it initially where those incidents were, and he doused the village and he marked on a map where where he thought that would happen, and they correlated with the medical information available for each of those houses. Couldn't do that nowadays because of data projection. There is an earth energy grid called Hartmann lines and Curry lines, named after the people that found them in sort of the 50s. But in terms of true science, where I want a repeatable experiment, then that is going to be difficult to prove, because I can go out and locate an energy line accurately with no problem whatsoever. But as soon as you put control on that, the ability to tune in tends to disappear. So therefore, because you're worrying too much about actually hitting what the targets have been set to keep repeating this, and that does actually cloud judgment. So there's various scientific things looking at this moment in time. I don't think anybody's brave enough to accept that you can actually do this, because a lot of vested interest is for people not to do it. One of the main indicators is like twisted trees, which you mentioned, or where trees are leaning in along a particular line or leaning out along a particular line. And that is due to the fact whether these energy lines could be negative or positive. But certainly along those lines, where they cross with other lines, or where they have a disturbance on the Schumann waves that resonate around the world, which actually resonate within ourselves, they can cause these circular vortexes, which if a plant is growing directly over the top of it, will tend to twist it either in a clockwise or anti-clockwise way. So they are good indications, just as you're walking around woodland, to be able to pick up energy lines underneath. Dowsing rods are actually an indicator of where these energy lines run. They make it easier for you to pick it up by visually seeing the rods move. They also give you an idea of where the centre of that particular energy line is and where the outside edges of that particular line, because a line is not a thin line, it's quite a wide line in some places, or these parallel lines. And without the dowsing rods, you would struggle to know exactly where these lines actually fall.